Alright, gonna be testing the audio here. Hopefully it sounds okay. Alright, gonna be testing the audio here. Hopefully it sounds okay. Yeah, I think it sounds fine. Alright, so let's go ahead and continue where we left off. Alright, so let's go ahead and... Okay, cool. Man, I am so exhausted. Okay, Unity, I gotta love how long it takes to open on occasions. Alright, so where we left off is, if I remember correctly, we went over input. So now we can create any type of mapping as a template and be able to enable input, subscribe to an event with it, and easily do stuff in that regard. I do want to add one thing where it will map it. It will then create the input together. I think that would be a nice thing to add in the static methods. So here we have map and unmap. So I'm gonna also make one called public static boolean map and create input. And this will take in as well an Unreal objects, view objects, and then this time it's also going to take in a controls, where controls arise from the input collection. You know what? Can I name it the same thing as map? I think so, because even though the parameters aren't changing, I think because of it's a template. Let me see though. I just return true here. Ah, it does. Okay, I didn't know that. I thought it's parameter based, so templates too. Cool. Okay, so we'll keep it as map, and this will create the input and map it. So we can then say if the dictionary that contains value, so this entire thing. So if it already contains a value, we want to make a change here to, so already mapped. Now check for input to be created, and then we're just going to call create input, controls, and then new objects. And then now we can then return this instead. And then this can do that. And then mapping will now return this. And then we can also well, actually out a boolean, out the controls, out mapping content. context. I think that makes more sense. So we can return, we'll just return true and then do something like this. So return false, but we can then say our mapping context equals this and then do this. And then here we can return true, but again, our mapping context equals creates. Did I say oh, it should be an E here. It's funny. Okay. Create input, and then this is going to take in controls. A few objects. Now oh, so instead we could do this. So if there's no mapping, this actually might be better. And then do this. And we can just return this as a base, because it's always going to. And then as a boolean, we can say, so now we can just return this. As a boolean, we can create, so created, I guess, contains and we could say this equals false here, else it's true. Now that would be saying, actually no, I don't think we'll ever use that. And if I ever did, I could explicitly say it. There's no point really. I think this is fine. So this will map it. So now instead of calling create input and then mapping, we can now say this dot map, and then we can then say, so this would only map it, it would call this one, but if you want to access the other one, we would then pass in controls. Oh, whoops. Unreal. Is that what I called it? Unreal input controls? It was. Okay, cool. See, and that just reduced a line. Now, one other thing we want to do is to have a boolean we could pass in called enable. Yeah, enable. And instead we can say var mapping equals this. And then what we can do is say if enable, we can say mapping dot enable, and then return the mapping like that. So now if you pass in true here, that would then say yes, we're going to enable it. So this removes this line too. Now subscribing, what we can do is we can pass in something else that will clean it up. So I'm just going to copy all this real quick just as a reference of what we're passing in. Okay. I'm going to make something up here called subscribe data. And actually we'll do a class. It's fine. And we're gonna need all these items. So, well, we can kind of exclude this one, so it's fine. But we're going to have an input action. A public Unreal input action type. A public action input action .call.context called the event to call. Type of action, the input action. I guess we can say action, and then the event to call. And then we can have a constructor. So I guess event data. We can call it event data. Event data. And here we can pass in a input action, a Unreal input action type called type of action. I'll say type here. An action of a input action .callbackContext event to call events. Oh, that's the name taken. Say at events. And what we can do here is then say this dot action equals action, type of action equals type, and then the event to call equals events. Now what we can do is pass in this event data, and then here we can say event data dot action, event data dot type of action, and event data dot event to call. There we go. Same thing here. We can just pass in this. Okay, and that really simplifies it. So that what that also means is we can create a new mapping where now if we really wanted to, we can pass in a event data called event data. So what it's going to do is it's going to pass this in and subscribe. So event to subscribe, or on subscribe event data. And now what we can do is we can say if our on subscribe event data is not null, we can then say subscribe to events saying u objects and then on subscribe event data. And that will then do this. And what that now means is on this entire thing, we can then say a new events data, or I guess Unreal input controls dot. Did I make it private? Oh, Unreal input dot event data. And here we can pass in all these parameters. And then remove this. And now for this mapping, we can actually remove it, but we can just disregard it for now. So what we can do actually is remove a mapping. And we'll just say action equals null. Or no. Yeah, we can't do it while we map because they're gonna have to get some type of. They have to know what type, because I can't say mapping dots this. So no, that's fine. We'll keep subscribe as well. That's fine. So, but I think that so we can just say this dot subscribe to an event, and we can say a new event data like that. Oh shoot, did I not copy the oopsie daisy? Here we are. Okay. And then pass that in. And then now mapping is this. And then now we can just say a new events data like so. So that way, if you want to pass event data, it makes it more easy to just say, hey, this is my event data. So I'm going to actually remove this constructor. And then now, actually, because mapping is never going to use it, we don't need this. And then I'm going to move this up a little bit. Like so. Okay, cool. So we have that working. Now we're going to need some type of method for this. But let's go ahead and double check everything. So we have mapping. So it's really easy now to make a thing. We can map it, which will then also create it. And then we can subscribe to an event. Just like so. One thing this is missing is to completely unsubscribe or, I guess, disable an event action. So I guess what we can do, and we don't really need it in this class, the object input data, because nothing really needs to be known here. The only thing that was really used was the parent. So we can just say public static boolean enable or disable action. We'll just say enable action. And here we can pass in a input action. And we can say action dot enable public static boolean. Oh, sorry. Void disable action puts action dots input action and then action dot disable like so. These will gonna go up here, and then I'm gonna take these and move it under here. So now if we save this, we should be updating the position by that value. So it should still work. Okay, we have our cube, and we can now move it. Now, one cool thing we could do technically on our widget, just to test, is let's open that up, and let's say public void, I guess, public text mesh pro UGUI text. I guess we can do a private. We'll say public void update text string, and we'll say text.setText. Value. Okay, and then on our test pawn, since we've created this widget, we can then say our widget reference dot, I guess, every time we've updated this guy here, and say if widget reference is not null, or what you could do to make sure it's always null, is not null, is do it inside of here. So we're only going to create this mapping if the widget's created. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say our widget ref dot update text to say this. So position is going to be our transform dot position as a vector 30 ints. Should be able to convert that now. Okay, that's fine. We'll just do this and then .x. I guess we can do each one as an int separately. That's weird they didn't provide a way to cast that over. I guess we only want X and Y, so I don't really need this. So I think it was X and Y, yeah. And then I'll put a comma in here. Maybe I want this color equal to blue, or actually let's look at some widget colors. Let's see. So let's see, mess around with like, I like that. Color equals hashtag this position slash color. So okay, so now when the widget is created, it will then create a mapping, subscribe to that event, and then update and then on that event, every time it's triggered, we're going to set read the value of that whatever we pressed, WASD, multiply it by this value, and then update the text. I think that's great. And so now, oh, well, that broke. Let's see here. Oh, I never set the, oopsie daisy. Never set this guy here. Now, this is going to say hello, so by default, I'll make it, we could just set it, so I'll just set it to be the this guy. Yeah. By default, so it should just say 0, 0 right off the base, but yeah, position 0, 0. I move it, and then on the int value, the closer it gets. And there we go. We have a nice little way to see where we're at. And you'll see it is accurate to our position. Click on the cube. You'll see here's our position of our test pawn. See, as we're getting closer to the int value, it then does it. And if we increase the speed to like, let's say 10, it's obviously going to be way faster. 20 is going to be double that. And I didn't really explain it in the last live stream what normalize was doing, so I apologize, but I'll explain it here before we do the input. If, let's say you're moving up 1, right, on a graph, so you've made it to this position. Sorry, I was doing something. So this would be 1, right? That's W. Okay, that's fine. You're going to move the cube up 1, right, position. But let's say you also press D, right, because you have W, A, S, D. So let's say we press the D key, okay, as well. Well, that's also going to go this way. Now, the problem with that is, well, okay, this is this area here, and this is this area here. Well, logically, 1 plus 1, 1 over 1 on the graph, right, would be here. But if you look, that's further. Because if you remember in math school, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, right? Because the hypotenuse is always going to be longer. And so this is longer. So instead what we can do is we can normalize these values, and instead we would actually find the correct way. And when normalizing, it's going to normalize it. And what that means is now we're going to determine 2 points, cross over them, and this is where it's going to be normalized. And so we know this is where we should be. And it's going to be like 0.667 or something like that. If I do that, and in fact, if I were to debug.log our direction, you would actually see this happening. So I'm pressing W, it goes up. If I press down, left, and right, that's all correct. If I do W and down, see it's negative 0.71, 0.71. If I don't normalize these values, it's going to be 1 and 1, or negative 1 and negative 1. That's not really what we want. So if I actually look here, see? Okay, it's still normalized. I think it's just because the positioning by default is normalized, but I hope that makes sense why that happens. And in fact, if you actually click on normalize, it returns the magnitude of 1. So it's going to get a result. It's going to normalize this result. So if the normal, the number is greater than this, so 1e, whatever this value is, this divided by that number. And we're going to then say it equals 0. Anyway, that's what that means. So in today's, I guess, stream, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take some stuff into consideration with regards to a sound manager. So now we have input, we have Unreal stuff. So let's take in the sound manager. So I'm going to close this, close this, and this. So in our sound manager, we're going to have a few things. So we're going to say public static class Unreal Sound Manager. So we're going to need to make a few scripts in our essentials. One's going to be a volume mixer. Another one is going to be a sound objects. All right. So in here, this is again going to be in the namespace, mythic.unreal integration. We are going to need using Unity Engine here to take advantage of scriptable objects. So we'll say scriptable object here. And then we can just do something like create asset menu, file name. I'll just say we'll say new sound object. That's fine. We're then gonna say menu name equals a Unreal integration / modules / sound objects. And then one thing I will say is under our abstract types, I will create a new one. Well, it's actually two new ones. So we already have dynamic audio objects, which we'll be taking a look at here in a second, but so our base types are here. So we have object, UI objects. Oh, we already defined Unreal module. Okay, that's what I was going to define. But another thing is a public abstract class called a Unreal attribute that derives from an attribute. Oh, need system. Okay. So now instead of Unreal script object, we can say Unreal module, and now we can have where we can say anything that relates to an Unreal module, it's now organized in that sense. So by default, we're going to want a public string called name of sound object, a public integer for the audio identifier, a public audio clip. This is like that clip you pass in for the sound file, and then a public sound identifier attribute. So let's go ahead and make that. In our scripts, I believe I made an ad. Yeah, here it is. So we're going to then just remove this. We can remove this too, and we'll say public. Actually, we'll say namespace mythic dot unreal integration. And in here, we're going to define a public class called a sound identifier attribute that derives from that Unreal attribute we just created. And the attribute usage is going to need an attribute targets.class, so it only can be on classes. We're gonna say it can be inherited, so whatever's being inherited will happen. And also we're gonna allow multiple of these. Actually, we don't want multiple of these. That's fine on one class type. So we can then say public int audio identifier. Did I spell it right? Yeah. It's only going to be a getter, so we will never be able to change this. As well as a public string called name. That's going to be a getter. We're never going to change this. We can then say a public sound identifier attribute, passing in a string. A string, and an int ID. Whoa, what is going on here? Name. Is my intelligence freaking out? Okay, there we go. Jesus. I don't know why it was. name, and then int ID. I don't know why it was doing that, but okay. And then we're going to say audio identifier equals ID. Now with getters, we're allowed to update them in the class for the constructor. Okay, and that's good for now. So back in our sound objects, we can then say sound identifier attribute. We can say associated sound identifier, and we're gonna say it's gonna be in a range between 0 and 1 for a volume. Oh, not that. Public float volume. By default, we'll set to 1, and then we'll say public sound objects. Here we're going to say our audio identifier equals 1 and our volume equals 1. Now, the reason we're by default setting this to 1 is because I think we're going to go ahead and keep main as 0. So I can do something like public void clone. If I ever want to clone one, and we can say sound object clone. And on cloning, we can then say our audio identifier equals a clone. Dot audio identifier. Our sound file equals our clone.sound file. Our associated sound identifier equals our clone.associated sound identifier, as well as our volume equal our clone.volume. Alright. So in Mixer, in our mixer that derives from a Unreal module, we're just gonna say namespace here, so it's in it, and we're gonna define a public abstract class as a sound identifier as a base, and then we can just simply say our sound identifier attribute and remember that is this guy, or we can then pass in a name and an ID. Here I'll just say main, and it's going to be on a public class sound identifier main that inherits from a sound identifier. I'll create 2 more for music as a 1 ID, and then maybe sound effects for a 2 ID. So we'll say music and then sound effects. So what we can then do is on this class we can say create asset menu, where the file name is can be a new mixer, new volume mixer, and we can then say the menu name is our Unreal integration / modules / volume mixer. So one thing we're gonna want is a volume. So we can define some things in here, but I want to make some type of property drawer for this type. So let's go ahead and make a thing we can make a property drawer of, and this is going to be a public class called audio container. That's going to be system.serializable. And in here, we're going to have a range between 0 to 1. No. For a public float audio weights, this will be how much weightage it has over the volume. And then have a public integer for the audio identifier, which is going to correlate to these IDs. We can then have something that correlates to the actual attribute if for whatever reason you as a person wants to grab them as a code. So you can also pass that in, called the current sound identifier. And then we can then hide an inspector to have a public int editor index. And this, I don't know if we'll use it as much, but it allows us to know what current index we've selected. And then we can have a hide an inspector for a public boolean is main to false. And then we can also have a constructor. So by default, we want the audio weights to equal 1F. We also want the audio identifier to equal 0, as well as is main equal to false. Now for the public audio container, I do want to define one as a main one, so we'll just pass in a byte here called defaults, and on this we can then say is main equal to true, and audio weights equal to 1F. The current identifier equals, oh shoot, we're gonna have to make a grabber method, huh? I think we are. Okay, that's fine. So in the Unreal editor, I guess we can now work on this one. So we'll say namespace mythic.unreal integration. We are going to be using reflection here to grab it. So we'll say using system.reflection. And as always, we're going to say hashtag if Unity editor, hashtag end if. We'll say using Unity editor. So it's going to be a public static class called Unreal Editor. Can I not do this? Oh. So in here, we're going to want a few things. One's going to be a public static Unreal attribute array called get attributes of type. And then let's pass in a template item for our Unreal attribute, and we'll say where our Unreal attribute derives from an Unreal attribute. And what we can say is our identifier types equals assembly, and this is why we need a reflection dot get executing assembly dot get type. So what this is going to do is grab all the types in here, and then we're going to say, actually we don't want to close this off yet, we're going to say dots where we'll just say t dot get custom attribute, because T for like template, type of a UA, and we can then pass in false for the inheritance. Then we can say dot length, where t dot get custom attribute type of UA is greater than 0. Okay, why is this being weird? Dots where t goes into t dot get custom attribute. Oh, s plural. Okay. I was like, why is that giving me an issue? Dot select t, and here we're going to say a new array where we're going to pass in a type that's t and an attribute that also equals t dot get custom attribute. Of UA. Wait, why is this outside? No, it should be inside. T attributes equals t dot gets custom attribute of UA, like so. If you're wondering where get custom attribute, it's part of a method that's external, which we'll go ahead and grab it from C#. Then what we can do is simply just return our identifier types dot select, because we're going to go ahead and select something from this array, and what we're going to select is t dot attributes, and then for this we're going to say dot to array to convert it over, and there we go. Now we might want to do something where it's one type. We're only grabbing one, so we can say public static unreal attribute. We can say get attributes of type, and here we're going to pass in a template as well as an attribute where t derives from a class type, and then where the unreal attribute, I just said attribute. Unreal attribute derives from a unreal attribute. Now again, we're going to say identifier types. So I'm going to copy this entire here. So this, we don't need this where anymore because we're going to do first of. So we can say dot get types dot selects, and then adding on to this we can say first of or defaults, and here we'll say t where t dot attribute does not equal null and t is a template item, and we'll say if like how I added that tab in, and we'll say if our identifier, no, let's just say identifier, makes more sense now. Identifier is null, we can return null, else we can return the identifier dot attribute. And there we go. Oh, and then we could probably see dot attribute is null. Okay. We should probably define for the sound object, but do that in a bit. So now, if I go back to our mixer volumes, on here we said equals, and we can now say Unreal Editor dot get attributes of type, and now we can then pass in this class. So we want the main type, and then we're going to say a sound identifier attribute we want to grab. Oh, get attributes. Attribute, not plural. Not sure work. Unreal Editor dot get attribute of type sound identifier dot main and a sound identifier attribute. Let me go to this get attribute of type. Maybe I am not returning the right Oh, does it not derive from Unreal? No, that's an Unreal. Assembly, we're returning a static. So I just say attribute. Oh, I don't mean this. It should be returning this. There we go. Okay. I was like, why is that giving an issue? Interesting. Okay. So outside of this audio container, we can then say something like public audio container called main audio mixer equals a new audio container. And if we pass in any type of default integer, it's going to by default take this constructor, even though we're not using default. It works as a way to know which constructor we want to take in. And then we can do something like a public audio container, an array called user defined mixers equals a new audio container. And this will just define that. So if I save this, go back to Unity, we should be able to, if we go to Essentials, Default Modules, if I go to Create, there's no Unreal Integration, Modules, and we have these options. So let's create here, and we'll say Default, Mixer, Default Unreal. Default, I guess Sound Mixer is fine. And then we'll have like a test sound to test sounds. Now, actually, before we do this, go back to our scripts. We want the sound object to take in a sound volume, and then the mixer to obviously also take from a mixer, so they look like a mixer. So okay, And now if we create those modules, or I guess you could say those scriptable objects, they will now take that icon and we can say default sound mixer, and then we could say something like default sound, I will say sound or something. So you can see we can give a name, an identifier, and a sound file, as well as this. Then we can go over here, and under these drop downs we have an audio weight and audio identifier, and then if we do this, same thing as well. Now you might be wondering, okay, well, what was the point of doing these attributes if we can't even use them right now? We can't see main, music, sound identifier. Well, we're going to be doing that, changing all that, where we can make a drop down, and this will only now be read only. So to do this, first let's go ahead and combat our sound object, being able to see this part. So I do have a handy method on me that I will be copying and pasting. This just allows me to draw an outline for a title. So let me just copy this here and put that in here. So now this just allows me to make a simple outline, just code I had handy. So one thing we're going to want to do in the namespace outside of this static class is to have a custom editor type of a sound object, and in here we're gonna have a public class sound object editor that derives from a Unity editor .editor. Again, this is also going to be encapsulated in a hashtag if Unity editor and then hashtag and if. So in here we're going to want to do something. So one thing is going to be taking the override method of the on inspector GUI. On here, we don't want to draw anything. We can also say draw default inspector. So we want to, because what it does is going to draw this, and this is from Unity. Instead, what we're going to do is serialize an object.update. So all changes will be updated on the next draw call. And then we're going to cache in our GUI.background color equal to a new color, and a good color I really like is a really light blue, so 2.5F, 0.9F on green, and then 1 on that blue there. Then we want to grab each of the properties in the sound object, so name of sound object, audio identifier, sound file, and associated sound identifier. So we can then say serialize property, and we can say audio identifier property. We can then have a serialized property for a volume property, volume prop, a serialized property for a sound file prop. This will be the audio clip. We'll have a serialized property for the sound object name prop. This will be that. So this is going to equal the serialized objects, which is relating to the sound object dot find property. And we're going to grab the audio identifier, which is this one here. I'm going to copy this a couple of times. Okay, and then here we're going to say volume. here we're going to say sound file, and then what did I name that one? Associated sound identifier. Okay. Next, let's go ahead and define a GUI style for our editor. I'm just going to call this like header style. This is something I'm going to be passing to this method that I just copied and pasted there. So we're going to say equals a new GUI style, and in here we're going to pass in the GUI.skin.label. This will allow us to pass that parameters are already in there. We're going to say our font size equals 24. Our font style equals a font style.bold. Let's go and do alignment to be centered. So text anchor dots middle center. Let's go ahead and set a normal equal to our text color. I gotta do it in brackets. Text color equals color.white. Now we can say Unreal Editor dot draw label without outline. We'll say sound object. We'll say header style color dot white, color dot black, and then let's do a 2 outline width. Right off the bat, if I save this, go back to Unity, I look sound object. I should be creating that title. Yep, so it does say sound object, and if I change this text to just say like sound, it will also update to say just sound. There you go. Okay, so now we can actually play around with the serialized objects. So we're going to say editor GUI layout dot property field. We're going to say our sound object name property to be a new GUI content, and we'll say name. And then here we're going to do dot slider actually for the volume. I'll call this volume. This one's going to be the sound file name for the sound file property. Now you might notice we haven't used the audio identifier yet, and this is going to be the biggest part. So we're going to first need to grab our attributes, which we can grab by saying Unreal Editor dot get attributes of type, and then we can then pass in a sound identifier attribute, and then getting an array from these attributes. So saying attributes, so we'll say options actually equals attributes dot select, and we're going to select make an array of name dot to array attributes, selects a attributes of type. Why is this not letting me do this? Oh, this should be passing an array of UA. Apologies there. So it should take in the type. Okay, that works. Cool. And then we can say int our current index equals mathf dot max. So we're going to take the max of 2 values between 0 and attributes dot to list. And we're going to say we're going to find the index where A is the audio identifier, which also equals the audio identifier prop dot int value. So what this will do is it's going to create, so it's going to pick between 0 or this one, whatever is larger, and it's going to create a list, and it's going to find an index where a of the audio identifier also equals the integer propt. We can then say int new index equals editor GUI layout dot prop dot popup, and then we can then say sound identifier, the current index, and option. I'll make this plural. Now what we can do is say if our new index does not equal our current index, audio identifier prop dot integer value equals attributes of a new index dot audio identifier. Then finally we can apply these changes by saying serialized object dot apply modified properties. Awesome. So now we have a way to be able to do all this. So if we save this file and go back to sound, oh, that doesn't look good. It's not drawing anything. Oh. I just realized I made a goofy name. Yeah, it should be this, and then yeah. There we go. So name is showing up. Let me pick a name. Why is this one not? Is this in volume not the same name? I swear it is. Oh, sound file. Sound file. Sound file. Oh, weird. Why did I not put an F here? Okay, I think that should fix all those. We shall only pray. Nope. Yeah, okay, cool. So now I can give it a name, like hello sound object. We can then choose a volume as well as main, music, or sound effects. Sick. Now these are all showing correctly. If we were to add simply, now it's really easy to add to a new mixer group anywhere in the file. If I simply just copy and paste this, we put like some type of associated ID, and we say test, or I guess sound effects 2 or something. If I actually save this, it will now show up as a drop down right here. Okay. Alright, so the next thing to combat is having the same method but to work with our volume mixer. Now, fortunately, we did define a audio container. So what we could do is go to our property drawer, And on here, say namespace mythic.integration, and on here we can say, like we did with the other one, we can say custom property, custom property. Why is it not? Oh, I need Unity editor. Using Unity editor, custom property drawer, a type of audio container. So to use that, it's going to be our volume mixer.audio container. And on here, we can define a public class audio container drawer that derives from a property drawer. So one thing they do have is on GUI. Oh, kind of already knows what I need to do. There you go. We have a position, a property, and a label. That's actually kind of sick. So what we're going to do is we can say something like editor GUI dot begin property position label and property. Okay. And we're going to want to grab a few serialized objects. If you look here, we have to get the audio weight, the audio identifier, and then also we're going to want to grab is main by default. So we're going to go ahead and say audio weight property. So audio weight prop. Equals property dot find property relative, which will look and find everything that's around it, and we'll say we're gonna go ahead and try to grab audio weights like so. Oh, not objects, property. Completely different thing. So next thing is the audio identifier prop, which is going to take from the audio identifier. We're also going to go ahead and grab that is main variable. So is main property. Now, one thing I did beforehand is calculating how wide everything should be. And these are those params that I was able to find that looked okay-ish. And then what we're going to do is say our editor GUI.property field weight rect an audio weight property, a new GUI content of audio weights. We'll say GUI.enabled equal to false to disable editing the ID, and we'll say editor GUI.property field identifier rect audio identifier property and a new GUI content, and we'll just say audio identifier ID. Now you might guess what we're going to be doing next. If we look at our sound objects on that here, remember how we did this whole thing, so we can just grab this, then we can grab this. We're gonna very slightly Actually, no. We'll grab everything. We'll paste that here. So on here, let's just grab the Boolean value. We'll say Boolean is main equal is main prop dots Boolean value. So we have the current index and then new index. Awesome. So what we're going to do is say if our current index is 0 and we are not main, then we know we shouldn't be on main, and we're just going to set the new index equal to 1. And if we are not main, then we're going to say our audio identifier prop dot int value equals attributes of our new index dot audio identifier, and then we'll say our property field property dot serialized objects dot apply modified properties. If we are main, we'll just go ahead and just do it without serializing, and we can just default a 0 index here. Okay. Next, let's go ahead and just say editor GUI.end property. You have to go ahead and define this so it knows where to begin and where to end. And in fact, if I save this already, let me go ahead and look at our modules. We now have an audio weight. Well, that's kind of conflicting. I'll fix that in a second. The main, and if we have this drop down, we now see that it's here. But we'll go ahead and fix this part in a second. So one issue I think that's happening is we need to define some type of overlap. So we can say public override float gets property height. Damn, okay, story fills stuff in. But instead we're gonna say return the editor GUI utility dot single line height, and then we can multiply this by some arbitrary value and add an offset, and this is what I found to be nice. We'll go back there, and now it has some spacings and gaps. Oh, it's not working for childs. Let me see why. It's false. You know, just to display it, let's just say is main, and then the wrong thing. Here we can say is main, and then is main prop, and then just say is main. Let's see what that displays, because if they're both saying true, that's gonna be an issue. Oh, let's add an offset rect2. Why is that? Oh, that's right. I need that offset for every single one. We'll say +6, and then here this will be is main. And then we'll just put this at the bottom because, yeah. Okay. So we have is main's true, is main's false. Okay, so it is false here. So this by default should be that. Oh. This needs to be back to true as well. And if we try to change it, it doesn't. But this one lets us. Maybe resets. Okay, that works so far. The next issue is combating. So if it's not main, we're going to apply after everything. I don't know why it wasn't being. Yeah, that's just still lets us. Okay. We're setting the index to 1. Oh, is not main. Apologies. There we go. Okay. So now it will, no matter what, not let you select main, and these are the only ones that are selectable. Cool. Now I am going to remove is main just because I was checking the positioning there. Oh wait, we don't want to remove that one. And then we can remove this. Cool beans, cool beans. So now we have some type of slider that will work. Again, if it's what it looks like by default. Now it's kind of bland with the regards, so let's go ahead and do some title work. So on the volume mixer, let's go ahead and create that custom editor. So custom editor. So we are going to have to say using Unity editor. And on the custom editor, we can say type of a volume mixer and call this a volume mixer editor that derives from a editor. Kind of public override void on inspector GUI. So what we're going to do first is we're going to copy the property drawer of not property drawer, the editor script of this. Paste this here, and I'm just going to call this our volume mixer. And now it will say this volume mixer. It has these groups identified. Now to me, I want to be able to have different colors for the different attributes. And one thing we can do is define that. So in attributes, I do have something I can copy and paste here. And this is just for color change, something I use in a lot of my projects. It's not the best thing in the world, but it definitely works. So using the engine, and yeah. So now I can just pass in Unreal GUI color to any property that that is defined and allows for it. So as long as they acknowledge it. And so what we can do is on the audio container, is do something like this. And if I go to here, we can then pass in that Unreal GUI color. And this, you can see, takes in a type. So all background or content. And then we can also pass in a color. So in our volume mixer, we can then say content. Actually, let's do backgrounds. And then we'll do a color of red, because it's something that should not be changeable. And then this one, let's use that same color we use for the sound objects, which is this here. And just like that, we now have color for our different defined mixers. So that all works. Now if I say .content, it will then change all the contents. Like so. And if I say both, or all actually, it will then do everything. Like so. And honestly, that looks pretty good. I am happy with the results. So now we can change the volume options, define a volume weight. We can't adjust this weight. One thing, yeah, and then we don't have to look at the identifier here. We can just select the type here. Okay, so now we can actually do the mixer options. I know it's a lot setting up, but it's really nice to be able to have this. Alright, so let's go ahead and make that sound type. So by default, we're gonna have a private static volume mixer volume mixer, and a public static volume mixer. And this will be an only a gets, where we can then gets I never named it volume mixer. And we're gonna go ahead and return our volume mixer. We'll then have a private static list of a dynamic audio object for an audio object. And and we're gonna go ahead and click on this guy. Just taking a look here. Yeah. And in here, we're going to want to define two things: hide an inspector, a public audio source for a source, a hide inspector, a public sound object, which is the sound object associated, parent sound objects, and then a protected override, void begin play. So on begin playing, we're going to then say the source equals get components audio source. Now if I go back to the static types, I can then use these to our advantage. So we can have a public static void initialize volume mixer, volume settings, and we can say our volume mixer equals our volume settings. Then can have a public static dynamic audio object, where we can then say creates audio. We're going to pass in a sound object, S object, and a boolean called play, and then also a boolean to destroy on audio finish. This will just allow us to simply say whether or not we want to destroy the object, and then we'll say var our dynamic audio object equals a new game object, where we say audio is a S object dot name of sound objects, where it's a new type array, where we're going to say type of an audio source. So let's go ahead and create that audio source. We're also going to say a type of dynamic audio objects, and then after all this we'll say dot get components a dynamic audio objects to grab it like so. We can then say dot parent sound object equals our scriptable object dot create instance of a sound object, then a dynamic object dot parent sound object dot clone the DA sound objects. Actually, you know what? I don't think we need to do clone here, because it's going to create an instance. Oh no, it's fine. We'll say dot clone S objects, yeah, because we want to copy everything over. Then we can say RD object dot source dot clip equals RD object dot parent sound object dot sound file. Then RD objects dot source dot volume equals our determine volume, and I'll make this here in a second, of our parent sound objects, and then our RD object. So if play, we'll say RD object dot source dot play. Okay. So obviously we're going to go ahead and make sure that it is not null by saying this, and then if it is not null, we'll create a new list of dynamic audio object. So if it is null, and we'll say audio objects dot add our audio objects object our DA object, sorry. And then let's simply just return DA object. We could do destroy audio finish and do that in a second, but we'll get to that later. So determining the volume of a sound object is quite simple. We're simply going to grab the ID equals our S objects dot audio identifier, and if our ID is 0, we can just simply return our volume of that object multiplied by the main audio weight. So this will grab just main. Else we're going to say for each volume mixer dot audio container mixer in our volume mixer dot user defined mixers. For each one, we're going to simply say if our mixer dot audio identifier equals the correct ID, we can then return our S objects dot volume multiplied by our mixer dot audio weight. Then we want to multiply it by our mixer dot main audio mixer dot audio weight. If this wasn't the case, we can then debug.log some type of weird error, which should never be the case, but if it for whatever reason is, we'll say error no mixer found with ID, and we'll say pass in that ID, return 0f. Okay, now we want to have some way to update the volume on all these guys. So we can have a public static void update mixer settings, update mixer sound objects, or update mixer. So if any changes you want, so we'll say for each dynamic audio objects, and audio objects, we'll go ahead and say dynamic audio object dot source dot volume equals determine volume of the dynamic object dot parent sound object. We'll then have a public static void for update a dynamic audio object like directly. So this dynamic audio objects okay, and then we can then say while our dynamic audio objects oh wait, sorry. No. We can just simply say our dynamic audio object dot our source dot volume equals determine volume, and then here we can just specify the correct parameters. What I was going to go into, getting ahead of myself, is a update I enumerator waits for audio to finish, which will take in a dynamic audio object, for an action use system on finish. So while our dynamic audio object is not null, and the dynamic audio object source.is playing, we can yield return null, and then on finish dot invoke if it is not null. Okay, that seems good. Now it will create audio, it will add it to this array, now we do want to go to our game mode real quick and look at also this. So here we have a coroutine instancer, so we can say game manager dot create coroutine instancer. So if the coroutine is not null, we'll do this. And now under here, after we add it, we'll say game manager dot coroutine instancer and here we're going to return the coroutine instancer like so. Okay, and then now we can say dot coroutine instance, and this should be a private. Just realize these are all public for some reason. Okay. Dot start coroutine now, and I can go ahead and say wait for audio to finish, passing in the dynamic audio object, and then on here we'll say destroy on finish. If yes, we'll say, so we'll just say if destroy on finish. We'll destroy game object dot destroy da object dot game objects. Okay. So on that, back to the abstract types, we're going to create that coroutine instance. Oh, and then obviously down here, we're now going to want to do a private volume mixer called volume mixer, and we'll say initialize volume here. And here we can say volume mixer dot or I guess Unreal Audio Unreal Sound Manager dot initialize, and here we'll pass in the volume mixer. Now, one thing I do want to do is on doing all this, so we have this. We also want to remove it first. So we'll say audio objects dot contains the objects. We'll say if, and if this is true, we can then say our audio objects dot remove DA object, and then we can then destroy the game object of it. Awesome. Now again, just clarifying here, when we create an instance, we're going to create new game objects. And then we do maybe you can't pass an apparent here, which is fine. Just say our sort of dots transform dot parent equals and then our underscore coordinate inster dot position equals vector3.0. I'll do the same thing for the audio. So we'll say our equals our game manager dot game mode dot transform, and then we can do this. Create audio dynamic audio objects, clone data, play, and then before I play it, let's add it to a list. Add to lists. Reference. Play it. Wait for audio to finish, and then remove. And actually, so only if we're destroying, we will then remove it and add it. So that way there's no like inconsistency of destroying if we don't want to. All right. So now what's nice is if we go to our test pawn. Oh, actually let's get a generic audio sound effects. I do have some from some other things, so do you have any like music? one that's not too long. Or we can do sound effects. Okay, that bird one's fine. Let's use this one for now. Okay, so if we go to our default modules, we can then we can either click this dot or we can drag in this guy, and we're going to associate main. If I go to my test pawn, remember this is only going to be called when the game mode finishes everything. So the pawn is set. So what we can do is we can then have a serialized field for a private sound objects called sound objects, or like, I don't know, bird sound effects that you might want. And then you can just say Unreal sound manager dot create audio. You can then pass in the bird sound effects. Let's go ahead and play it on start, and let's also destroy it when the audio finishes. Now what's nice is this also returns the dynamic audio, so you can also make changes to that. Let me turn off this music for a second. And oh, thank you, Adrian. Thank you. I was actually did not see your text. Apologies. So if I actually go to the test pawn object, I can then pass in this, and we'll just do main for now. And since this guy's main, we can do that, and then we'll just pass in this. Okay. So, oh, that's not good. Script cannot be abstract. Oh, it should be class. I think the coroutine instance is not set to an instance. Let me check that with fact checking. We can do debug.log. We'll say game manager dot coroutine instance. So if it's true, we can say this. Else we'll say null. And we'll say this dot name. Let's see if that's null. That might be causing an issue. Okay, it is null. Why is that null? Oh, at this. Okay, is null. Okay, that's actually kind of funny. Let me save that. And yep, there we go. And now if I go back to the the static types and move this. This should work now. And then it destroys it. Nice. Now, if we don't want it to destroy, we can then pass in false here for destroying. And you'll see it was not destroyed. Now, you'll see here the volume is 1. Now, if I update the volume mixer, let's say to like 0.5 or something. Oh, wrong one. This part to 0.5. Then the audio will be 0.5 because multiplying it. Yep. Now, if we also take the audio of the sound object to 0.5, and then it's going to multiply this one and that one together, giving us 0.5. Or 0.25, apologies, which it did. Now, and let's take in a calculator. So let's say we have 0.5 times 0.5. So you have that, and then it would be 1.25, yeah. So 0.5, 0.5. So let's go ahead and set this to music. And then we'll go ahead and make sure. Oh, this isn't. Okay, I just realized it's an issue, but we'll create the music, I guess, for now. And we'll set this guy to 0.5. So we'll take 0.5 of this, and then the audio, and then multiply again by the weight. And it should be like 0.125. Which 0.25, 0.5, 0.5. Oh, it was taking this one as well. .25. Put this guy back to 1. It's not updating the. Oh, it's 0.5. It's not multiplying these. Volume multiplied by. Let's do a debug here. Say main. I think this is returning true, so I don't think the sound object ID is updating. Which could definitely be the case. So so let me see. Oh, didn't say that. So if I put this as 0, is it gonna be 0? No, music's one of them. Let's see what's going on here. The ID is 1. The ID is 1 here. Why did it work if the volume was up? That was weird. Oh shoot! This should not be audio weight dots. Audio identifier. It was looking for the audio weight for anything that was 1. It's actually kind of funny. Okay, there we go. And let me remove this guy now. So it's music. Okay, so that one was set to 1. If I then set this guy to be 0.5, 0.5, it is. And if I set the sound module to be 0.5, it should be 0.25, which is true. And if I then set the volume module to be 0.5, this should also be 0.5. Daily coding VODs will make them easy. Right. And it was, right? So that's right. I don't know. So it's all working there. Let me look at the property drawer. Yeah, shouldn't be making it down there. That's an issue. Hmm. I also don't want ID now. Okay. I don't know why I'm blanking right now. You know, when in doubt, we can always ask ChatGPT, right? Let's see what they say. Let's see. Okay, I did, and this is what it legit spat out to me. So hopefully this was right. Oh wow, it doesn't even show anything. What the heck? No, this won't work. Oh shoot, not mean to paste this on this one. Here. Okay, well, that just is absolutely blank. Holy cow. Why is it blank? Okay, you know what, we'll leave it for now, and we can always come back to this issue. I think that's fine. I'm not too sure why they're not showing up here, but yeah, it is what it is. And then okay. All right. And then this one should be background. All right, we fixed it all. Okay, so everything works. Brutal. All right. I think we're caught there though. So everything is working in that regard now. So cool. All right, June.